The New Mexico sun hammered down on Garrett Vale's back as he drove the fence post into the hard earth. Each strike of the hammer echoed across the empty land, a rhythm as steady as his heartbeat. Sweat darkened his shirt. Between the shoulder blades ran down the scar that cut from his forehead to his jaw, a permanent reminder of fire and failure. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the hottest part of the day. Most men would have stopped working hours ago, found shade, waited for the temperature to drop. But Garrett Vale was not most men. He was a man trying to outrun his past one fence post at a time. The land stretched around him in every direction, broken only by distant mesas and the occasional scrub brush that somehow found life in the dust. His ranch, if you could call it that, consisted of a small cabin, a barn that leaned slightly to the east, and 30 acres of unforgiving earth that fought him every single day. He had built it all himself over the past 6 years, every board, every nail, every post, no help, no partners, no friends. That was how Garrett Vale wanted it. He set the hammer down, wiped his face with a cloth already soaked through, and reached for his canteen. The water was warm, tasted like metal, but it was wet. He allowed himself 3 swallows, then stoppered the canteen and hung it back on the fence post. That was when he heard the gunshots. The sound came from the east, distant but unmistakable. 3 rapid cracks, then a pause, then 3 more. Garrett's hand went instinctively to the Winchester rifle leaning against the fence 20 feet away. He did not move toward it, not yet. In this part of New Mexico, gunfire could mean many things. Hunters, ranchers, shooting predators, travelers in trouble, none of his business. He picked up the hammer again, positioned the next post, raised his arm to strike. Then he saw her, a figure running across the open ground, stumbling, arms pumping. Even from a distance, Garrett could see the desperation in her movement. She was not running towards something. She was running from something. And she was running directly toward his property. Behind her, 4 riders appeared over the low rise, their horses at full gallop. Dust rose in clouds behind them. More gunshots cracked the air. A bullet kicked up dirt 10 feet to the woman's left. Garrett's jaw tightened. His fingers gripped the hammer handle until his knuckles went white. Do not get involved. Do not get involved. Do not get involved. The woman was closer now, close enough that he could see she was Apache. Her doeskin dress was torn at the shoulder, dark with sweat and dirt. Her long black hair had come loose from its braid, whipped behind her as she ran. She was holding something against her chest, clutching it with both arms, even as she ran for her life. The riders were gaining. They spread out in a line, herding her like wolves on a deer. Garrett could see their faces now, could see the grins, the casual cruelty of men who enjoyed the chase. The woman looked directly at him. Their eyes met across 50 yards of desert. Her mouth was bloody. Her face was desperate. But in her eyes, Garrett saw something that stopped his breath. Recognition. She was not running past him. She was running to him. And in that instant, in the split second before the next bullet sang through the air beside her head, Garrett understood. She knew who he was. The decision made itself. Garrett dropped the hammer, covered the 20 feet to his rifle in 4 long strides, brought the Winchester to his shoulder in a single fluid motion that his body remembered even after 6 years of trying to forget. He sighted down the barrel, compensated for wind and distance, and fired. The lead rider jerked backward in his saddle, tumbled sideways off his horse. The horse kept running, riderless. The other 3 riders reined in hard, their horses rearing. They had not expected return fire. They had expected an easy hunt. Garrett worked the lever action, chambered another round, fired again. Missed. The riders scattered, diving off their horses, seeking cover behind rocks and scrub. The woman reached Garrett's fence line. She tried to climb over, but her legs gave out. She collapsed against the posts, breathing in great, heaving gasps. Garrett kept his rifle trained on the rocks where the riders had taken cover. "Can you walk?" The woman nodded, could not speak. "The barn, 30 yards behind me. Go." She pushed herself up, stumbled toward the barn. Garrett fired twice more at the rocks, keeping the riders pinned, then turned and sprinted after her. Bullets chased them. One splintered the fence post next to Garrett's head. Another punched through the barn wall as he dove inside and slammed the door. Darkness, the smell of hay and old wood, the sound of the woman's ragged breathing. Garrett crossed to the far wall where he kept his ammunition, began loading his pockets with cartridges. "How many are there?" "4," the woman gasped. "Now 3. "Who are they?" "Morrison's men." The name hit Garrett like a fist to the stomach. Morrison. Of course it was Morrison. It was always Morrison. Outside a voice shouted, rough familiar filled with false camaraderie. "Vale, we know you are in there. This does not concern you. Send out the Apache and we will ride away. No one else has to die today." Garrett recognized the voice. Silas Cade, Morrison's right-hand man, the same man who had set fire to Garrett's house 6 years ago, who had left him for dead in the flames. The woman was staring at him now, her chest still heaving. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood. Her dress was torn, revealing bruises on her shoulder and ribs, but it was her eyes that held Garrett frozen. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. Impossible, but true. Ayanna. The name came out, barely a whisper. The woman's face crumpled. Tears cut clean lines through the dirt on her cheeks. The woman stared at him, confusion and fear warring in her expression. She did not recognize him. 6 years had changed Garrett too much. The scar that ran from forehead to jaw, the gray that had crept into his hair, the hardness that living alone had carved into his face. "How do you know my name?" Her hand moved to the knife at her belt. Garrett slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out the silver compass, held it where she could see the engraving. G.V. The woman's eyes went wide, her breath caught. "The man from the fire," she whispered. "The one who hid me. You are alive." "Yes, and so are you." Recognition flooded her face, then tears. She collapsed against the barn wall, shaking. "You remember me." Garrett's mind reeled back 6 years, a night of fire and screaming, a village of Apache families camping on land that Dalton Morrison claimed as his own. Morrison had given the order to clear them out, use force if necessary. Garrett had been Morrison's foreman, then had led 12 men to do the job, but when they arrived it was not warriors they found. It was women, children, old men. Garrett had tried to stop it, had shouted for his men to hold fire, but Morrison's orders had been clear and most of the men followed orders. The shooting started, then the blur, then the screaming. Garrett managed to save one child, a 12-year-old girl who had hidden beneath the wreckage of a burning wagon. He pulled her out, carried her to his own house, hid her in the root cellar until the violence ended. When Morrison discovered what Garrett had done, the punishment was immediate. Morrison's men set Garrett's house on fire with him inside. He survived barely, but the girl was gone. Garrett assumed she had run, found her people disappeared into the desert. He never learned her name, until now. "You are alive," Garrett said the words, inadequate, ridiculous. "I am alive because of you." Ayanna's hands were shaking. She reached into the small leather bag she had been clutching against her chest, pulled out something wrapped in cloth. A silver compass, engraved with the letters G.V. Garrett's throat tightened. He had given that compass to the girl before she fled, told her if she ever needed help find him. He never expected she would, never expected to see her again. "I kept it," Ayanna said. "I kept it because you were the first person who did not try to kill me, the only person." Outside, Silas Cade shouted again, "Vale, I am losing patience. You have 1 minute." Garrett looked at the compass in Ayanna's hand, looked at her face, no longer a child, but a woman now 25 years old and marked by suffering. Looked at the bruises, the torn clothing, the desperate exhaustion in every line of her body. "What are they chasing you for?" Ayanna unwrapped the cloth from around the compass. Beneath it was a book, a thick ledger bound in leather, its pages swollen with ink, and what looked like dried blood. This. She opened the ledger. Garrett saw names, dates, numbers, row after row after row. The handwriting was neat, methodical, the record-keeping of a careful businessman. "Morrison is not just killing Apache to take land," Ayanna said, her voice steady, now hardened by fury. "He is selling us women, children. He sells us to the silver mines in Mexico like cattle, like property. This ledger lists every transaction for the past 8 years. Garrett took the book with hands that had begun to shake. He flipped through pages, saw names he recognized, families, entire families. On the last page, one entry made him stop breathing. Neshoba family, 12 people, $600. Delivery Chihuahua Mine, March 15th, 1877. "Neshoba," Garrett said. "That is your family name." "Was my family name." Ayanna's voice did not break, but her hands clenched into fists. "Everyone died. My mother, my father, my 2 sisters, my uncle and aunt, and their children. All of them." "Everyone, no." Ayanna met his eyes. "My brother survived. Nashota. He is still alive, but Morrison has him prisoner. Morrison sent me a message 3 weeks ago. I have 7 days to trade this ledger for my brother's life. If I do not, Nashota will be thrown into the mine shaft alive." The pieces fell into place. The chase, the desperation, the ledger worth more than gold. "How did you get this?" "I worked in Morrison's house for 2 years, Ayanna said. "Cleaning, cooking. He never looked at me twice. I was just another servant invisible. One night he left his office unlocked. I found the ledger in his safe. I have been running ever since." Outside, Silas shouted again, but this time there was an edge of anger. "Veil time is up. Either you send her out, or we burn you out. You know we will do it. We have done it before." Yes, Garrett thought. They had done it before. The scar on his face throbbed with the memory of heat and smoke and flames. He could push Ayanna out the door, save himself, go back to his quiet life of fence posts and silence and slow suffocation under the weight of guilt. Or he could do what he should have done 6 years ago, choose the right side. Garrett stood, walked to the barn door, rifle in hand. He opened it. Silas Cade stood 50 yards away, partially hidden behind Garrett's water trough. He was grinning confident. Behind him, the other 2 riders had taken positions behind rocks. "Smart choice, Vale. Now send her out, and we will forget this ever happened." Garrett raised the Winchester, aimed, fired in one smooth motion. The bullet took Silas in the right leg. He went down screaming. Garrett worked the lever, fired again. The shot hit the man crouched behind the rocks in the shoulder. He spun and fell. The 3rd rider broke cover, running for his horse. Garrett fired a 3rd time. Missed. The rider made it to his mount, spurred the horse into a gallop, and disappeared over the rise, heading east. Garrett stepped out of the barn, walked to where Silas lay, clutching his leg. Blood seeped between his fingers. His face had gone white. "You made a mistake, Vale," Silas gasped. "Morrison will kill you for this. He will burn everything you have built." Garrett looked down at the man who had once set him on fire, felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, just a cold, clear certainty. Let him try. He fired once more. The shot ended Silas Cade. The wounded man behind the rocks was trying to crawl away. Garrett walked over, looked down at him. The man was young, maybe 22, and terrified. "You ride back to Morrison," Garrett said. "You tell him Garrett Vale is done hiding. You tell him I am coming for him. And you tell him I am bringing proof of everything he has done." The young man nodded frantically, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Garrett helped him onto his horse, slapped the animal's rump. The horse took off at a run. When Garrett turned back to the barn, Ayanna was standing in the doorway. She looked at Silas's body, looked at Garrett, looked at the blood on his hands. "You just gave up everything for me," she said quietly. "No." Garrett walked past her into the barn, began gathering supplies, ammunition, canteens, food. "I gave it up 6 years ago when I led Morrison's men to your family. Today I just stopped pretending I could outrun it. Where are we going?" Red Canyon Mine to get your brother. That is 2.5 days north if we push the horses hard. Morrison gave me 7 days total. I have already used 3 getting here. If we go to Red Canyon and come back, we will have maybe 1 day left. It will be close, very close. Garrett finished loading supplies into a leather saddlebag, turned to face her. Then we split up. I ride to Red Canyon, get your brother out. You take the ledger to Fort Sumner, deliver it to the territorial governor. He is the only man in New Mexico with enough authority to arrest Morrison. We meet at Ghost Ridge in 5 days. That gives me 2.5 days to reach the mine, 1 day to get your brother out, and just over 1 day to reach Ghost Ridge. No. Ayanna's eyes flashed. I do not trust anyone. Morrison owns half the officials in this territory. They will take the ledger and destroy it. I will be dead within a day. Then trust me. To do what rescue my brother alone against Morrison's men. Yes. Why would you do this? Garrett met her eyes, held her gaze, let her see the truth in his face. Because 6 years ago I made a choice that got your family killed. I cannot change that. But I can keep you alive. And I can bring your brother home. That is all I have left to offer. Ayanna's jaw trembled. She looked away, looked back, blinked hard against tears. If you fail, if you cannot save him, what then? Then you take the ledger to the governor anyway. Let the world know what Morrison did. Even if Nashota dies, his death will mean something. Ayanna was silent for a long moment. Outside smoke was beginning to rise from Garrett's cabin. The third rider must have set it on fire before fleeing. 6 years of work burning again. Garrett did not look, did not care. Finally, Ayanna nodded. I will trust you, but only because 6 years ago you were the only person who chose to save me when everyone else chose to run. They saddled 2 horses, loaded supplies, filled canteens from the well before the fire could reach it. By the time they rode away from the ranch, flames were consuming everything Garrett owned, his cabin, his barn, his fence posts. He did not look back. They rode west until nightfall, then made camp in a dry riverbed beneath an overhang of red rock. No fire, too dangerous. They ate dried meat and hard bread in silence, sharing a canteen. Above them, stars emerged in a sky so clear and vast it hurt to look at. The kind of sky that made a man feel small, insignificant, like all his sins and all his regrets meant nothing in the face of such immensity. Ayanna sat against the rock wall, hugging her knees. The ledger rested beside her, wrapped carefully in oilcloth. The compass hung around her neck on a leather cord. "Tell me about my brother," she said quietly, "what he will be like when you find him." Garrett did not sugarcoat it. He will be broken. 6 years in a mine will do that. He may not even recognize you, but he will be alive. If Morrison kept his word, Morrison does not keep his word to anyone. No, Garrett agreed. He does not. Ayanna pulled her knees tighter. When I was 12, after you hid me after the fire, I ran for 3 days straight. I did not sleep. I did not eat. I just ran. When I finally found other Apache, they took me in, but they did not trust me. They said I was cursed, said I brought death with me. Some of them wanted to leave me in the desert to die. She paused, swallowed hard. But an old woman, a healer, she said no. She said I survived for a reason, that the spirits had a purpose for me. I did not believe her then. I thought I survived by accident, by luck. And now, Ayanna looked at him. Now I think maybe she was right. Maybe I survived so I could stop Morrison, so I could save the others. There are others, dozens, maybe hundreds. The ledger only shows the ones Morrison sold. It does not show the ones who are still imprisoned, still working in his mines. If we expose him, if we can bring him down, they might go free. Garrett felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. This was bigger than one brother, bigger than one woman's revenge. This was about justice for hundreds of people whose names he would never know. "We will stop him," Garrett said. And for the first time in 6 years, he meant it. They slept in shifts. Garrett took first watch sitting with his rifle across his knees, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Coyotes in the distance, the whisper of wind through rock. Ayanna's quiet breathing as exhaustion finally pulled her under. When it was her turn to watch, Garrett lay down but did not sleep. He stared at the stars and thought about the man he used to be. The man who followed orders without question. The man who believed that if he just kept his head down and did his job, everything would be fine. That man had died in the fire 6 years ago. The man who emerged from the flames was different, harder, colder. But maybe Garrett thought maybe there was still something worth saving in him. Maybe. Dawn came gray and cold. They ate quickly, saddled the horses, prepared to part ways. Garrett checked Ayanna's rifle, made sure she had enough ammunition. "You know how to use this? My father taught me to shoot a bow. This cannot be much different. Point at what you want to stop. Squeeze, do not pull, and do not hesitate." Ayanna took the rifle, tested its weight. "How will I know if you succeeded, if you found Nashota? We meet at Ghost Ridge in 5 days. It is halfway between Red Canyon and Fort Sumner. If I am not there by sunset on the 5th day, assume I am dead. And if I am not there, same." Ayanna nodded slowly. Then she did something Garrett did not expect. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him in a brief, fierce embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me hope." Before Garrett could respond, she pulled away, mounted her horse, and rode east toward Fort Sumner without looking back. Garrett watched until she disappeared over the horizon. Then he turned north toward Red Canyon, toward the brother he had never met, toward a promise he might not be able to keep. He had 4 days. 4 days to cross hostile territory, infiltrate a fortified mine, rescue a prisoner, and make it back to Ghost Ridge alive. The odds were not good. But Garrett Vale had stopped caring about odds 6 years ago. He spurred his horse forward into the rising sun, and the desert swallowed him whole. Red Canyon sat like a wound in the earth, a deep gash of rust-colored rock that ran north to south for 3 miles. At its southern end, where the walls narrowed to a bottleneck, Morrison had built his mine. Not the kind of mine where men went home at night to their families, the kind where men went to die slowly, digging silver from stone until their bodies gave out. Garrett reached the canyon rim late in the afternoon of the 2nd day. He had pushed brutally hard, riding 16 hours each day, stopping only when the horse was near collapse. He ate in the saddle, slept in 90-minute shifts, drove himself and the animal to their limits. 2.5 days to cover what would normally take 4. It was possible barely, and he had made it. Now he lay flat on his belly behind a tumble of boulders, studying the mine through a small brass telescope he had brought from his saddlebag. The mine entrance was a black mouth in the canyon wall, reinforced with timber framing that looked newer than the rock around it. 2 guard towers flanked the entrance, crude structures of wood and stone with riflemen visible on the platforms. Between the towers, a cluster of buildings. Barracks, a supply shed, what looked like an office. Garrett counted men, 15 guards visible, probably more inside the mine itself, too many for a direct assault. He would need to be smart about this. He collapsed the telescope, inched backward from the rim, returned to where he had left his horse tied in a stand of juniper. As he reached for his canteen, a voice spoke behind him. "You move pretty quiet for a white man." Garrett spun, hand going to his pistol. Stopped. A young Apache man stood 10 feet away, bow drawn, arrow nocked, and aimed at Garrett's chest. He was maybe 18, lean and hard-muscled, with eyes that burned with barely controlled fury. "I have been following you since yesterday," the young man said, "waiting to see if you would lead me to Morrison." Garrett kept his hand away from his weapon. "Who are you?" "Kona, son of Chief Tasuda, who Morrison murdered 6 years ago." The arrow did not waver. "I know who you are, Vale. I remember you from that night. You were there when my father died." "Yes." "You helped kill him." "I tried to stop it. Not hard enough." Kona's jaw clenched. "My father's blood is on your hands. Give me one reason I should not kill you right now." Garrett met the young man's eyes, did not flinch, did not beg. "I cannot give you a reason. If you want to kill me, do it. But know that if you do, Ayanna Nashoba loses her only chance to save her brother." The arrow tip dipped slightly. "Ayanna, she is alive. Alive and trying to stop Morrison. I am here to rescue her brother from the mine. After that, we are going to destroy Morrison and everyone who works for him." Kona stared at him for a long moment. The arrow stayed drawn. Then slowly he lowered the bow. "I have been hunting Morrison for 6 years," Kona said, "tracking him, learning his patterns, waiting for my chance to put an arrow through his heart. But he is too well protected, too careful." He looked toward the canyon. "Is Nashota really down there?" "According to Ayanna, yes. And you plan to get him out, just you against 15 men, if I have to." Kona studied Garrett's face, searching for deception, for weakness. Found neither. Finally he nodded. "I will help you, not because I forgive you, but because my father would want me to save Nashota. And because when this is over, I want Morrison dead. You can help me do that." Garrett extended his hand. Kona looked at it for a moment, then gripped it briefly. His palm was calloused, his grip strong. "We attack tomorrow night," Garrett said. "I have to be at Ghost Ridge by sunset the day after tomorrow to meet Ayanna. That gives us tonight to plan tomorrow night to execute and 1 full day to ride to Ghost Ridge. Tight, but possible." "1 day is enough." Kona unslung his bow. "I know a way into the mine that the guards do not watch, but we will need a distraction." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Kona had been watching the mine for 3 weeks, knew the guard rotations, knew which men were lazy and which were alert. He sketched a rough map in the dirt with a stick, showed Garrett the layout. "The prisoners are kept in the deepest shaft," Kona said, "chained at the ankle. They work 16 hours a day, sleep where they stand. Morrison keeps them weak. Easier to control." "How many prisoners?" 8. "All Apache. Nashota is the oldest. The others are younger. Boys mostly. 14, 15 years old." Garrett's jaw tightened. Children. Morrison was using children. "Here is what we do," Kona continued. "Tomorrow night, just after the guard change at sunset, I create a diversion on the eastern side. Fire explosions make them think they are under attack. While they respond, you go in through the ventilation shaft on the western wall. It is a tight fit, but you can make it." "What kind of explosions?" Kona smiled grimly. "I have been stealing Morrison's blasting powder for weeks. I have enough to make them think the whole canyon is coming down." They waited for nightfall, then moved closer to the mine, taking positions in the rocks. Kona pointed out the ventilation shaft, a narrow opening in the canyon wall, about 40 feet above the mine entrance, partially hidden by an overhang. "Can you climb that?" Kona asked. Garrett studied the rock face. It was steep, but not impossible. Plenty of handholds. "I can climb it." "Good. When you hear the first explosion, you go. Move fast. You will have maybe 20 minutes before they realize it is a diversion and return to the mine. 20 minutes to find 8 prisoners, break their chains, and get them out." "Yes." "What about you?" "I will meet you at the northern end of the canyon. There is a trail there hidden. We can lose them in the rocks." Garrett nodded. It was a bad plan. Too many things could go wrong, but it was the only plan they had. They separated. Kona disappeared into the darkness, moving toward the eastern approach. Garrett positioned himself below the ventilation shaft and waited. The night was cold. Stars emerged sharp and bright. The moon rose a thin crescent that gave just enough light to see by. From the mine below, Garrett heard voices, laughter, the guards changing shifts. He thought about Ayanna riding alone toward Fort Sumner. Thought about the ledger she carried, the proof that could bring Morrison down. Thought about the promise he had made. Bring her brother home. Alive. The first explosion shattered the night. A bloom of orange fire erupted on the eastern side of the mine, followed by a concussive boom that echoed off the canyon walls. Shouts, bells ringing, men running. Garrett did not wait. He started climbing. The rock was rough under his hands, still warm from the day's heat. He moved quickly, finding holds, pulling himself up. 40 feet, 30, 20. Another explosion below, bigger than the first. The guards were panicking now, firing randomly into the darkness. Garrett reached the ventilation shaft, pulled himself inside. It was narrow, barely wide enough for his shoulders. He had to turn sideways, inch forward in the blackness. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of sulfur and sweat. He crawled for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes. Then the shaft opened up, and he dropped into a larger tunnel. Lantern light flickered ahead, the sound of metal striking stone. Garrett drew his pistol, moved forward carefully. The tunnel sloped downward, the air getting hotter. He passed side shafts, storage alcoves filled with tools and timber, kept going deeper. Then he heard it, a rhythmic clanking, the sound of chains. He rounded a corner and found them. 8 men chained by their ankles to iron rings set into the stone floor. They were emaciated, their ribs visible through torn shirts, their faces hollow with exhaustion. Most were boys, just as Kona had said, 14, 15 years old. Their eyes were dull, defeated, but one man older than the rest raised his head when Garrett appeared. His face was gaunt, covered in a thick beard, but his eyes still held fire. Garrett knew those eyes. They were Ayana's eyes. "Nashota," the man blinked. "Who are you?" "My name is Garrett Vale. Your sister sent me." Nashota's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, disbelief, hope so desperate it was painful to witness. "Ayana is alive. Alive and fighting Morrison. I am here to get you out." Nashota stared at him. Then his gaze dropped to Garrett's face, studying the scar, the features. "I know you," Nashota said slowly. "You were there, 6 years ago, at the village." "Yes." "You led Morrison's men to us." "Yes." "You helped kill my family." Garrett met his eyes, did not look away. "Yes. And I have spent every day since trying to make it right. Starting now." Nashota's jaw worked. Fury and pain warred in his expression. Then he looked at the chains, at the boys around him, at the dark mine shaft stretching away into blackness. "If you are lying, if this is some trick, I will kill you myself." "Fair enough." Garrett moved to the nearest chain, examined the lock, old, rusted, but solid. He pulled a small pry bar from his belt, wedged it into the shackle, and levered hard. The metal groaned, but held. "Damn it!" He tried again. Same result. "The keys," one of the younger prisoners said, his voice weak. "Guard keeps them in the office. Top level." No time to go up. The explosions outside had stopped. The guards would be returning soon. Garrett looked at the chain where it connected to the floor ring. The ring itself was set in old mortar, crumbling at the edges. He wedged the pry bar underneath, threw his full weight against it. The mortar cracked. He levered again. The ring came free. "I cannot unlock you," Garrett said, "but I can free you from the floor. You will have to run with the chains on." He worked quickly, freeing each prisoner in turn. The boys could barely stand, their legs weak from months of hard labor and little food. Nashota helped them his own chains, dragging his movements stiff. Garrett had just freed the last prisoner when he heard footsteps in the tunnel, voices, guards returning. "Move," Garrett hissed. "Back the way I came." They stumbled toward the ventilation shaft, the chains clanking with every step. Too loud. The guards would hear. "Wait," Nashota said. He turned to one of the younger prisoners. "Go back, make noise. Lead them the other direction." The boy's eyes went wide with fear. "They will kill me." "Maybe. Or maybe you save your brothers and become a hero. Choose." The boy looked at the others, at their desperate faces, their chains, their weakness. Something hardened in his expression. He nodded. "Go," Nashota said gently. "Run fast." The boy turned and ran deeper into the mine, his chains clanking loudly. He started shouting, making as much noise as possible. The guards' footsteps changed direction, chasing the sound. "Now," Garrett said. "Move." They ran. Nashota helped the weaker boys, half carrying them. Garrett brought up the rear pistol drawn. They reached the ventilation shaft. I cannot fit through that, Nashota said, looking at the narrow opening. You have to. I am too big. The chains will catch. Garrett looked at the shaft, at Nashota's broad shoulders, at the thick links of chain. Nashota was right. He would get stuck. Behind them, gunfire erupted. Screams. The boy who had led the guards away was dying, buying them time with his life. There is another way, Nashota said. The main entrance. We fight our way out. There are too many guards. Then we die fighting instead of crawling. Nashota's eyes blazed. I have been a slave for 6 years. I will not spend another minute in this hole. The other prisoners nodded. Even weak, even starving, they would rather die in open air than live one more day underground. Garrett made the decision. All right, we fight. They moved back through the mine, this time heading up instead of deeper. The tunnels grew brighter as they approached the entrance. Voices ahead, guards organizing, responding to the attack. Garrett held up his hand, stopped, listened. How many? Nashota whispered. At least 10, maybe more. Can you shoot? Yes. Then shoot fast. They burst from the tunnel entrance into chaos. Kona's explosions had set half the supply shed on fire. Guards ran in every direction, shouting orders, firing into the darkness. No one was looking at the mine entrance. Garrett shot the nearest guard in the back. The man fell. Garrett grabbed his rifle, tossed it to Nashota. Go north end of the canyon. There is a trail. They ran. Guards spotted them, opened fire. Bullets kicked up dust. One of the young prisoners screamed, went down. Nashota tried to help him, but the boy was dead. Keep moving. Garrett fired back, covering their retreat. They reached the canyon wall, started climbing the narrow trail Kona had described. It was steep, treacherous. The chains made every step harder. One of the boys slipped, nearly fell. Nashota caught him. Behind them, guards flooded out of the mine, at least 15 men, all armed. They formed a line, started shooting. Garrett and Nashota returned fire from higher ground, dropped 3 guards. The others took cover. We are not going to make it, one of the prisoners gasped. Yes, we are, Nashota said, but his voice held doubt. Then from above, arrows began to fall. Kona appeared on the canyon rim, shooting down into the guards below. His arrows were deadly accurate. 1 guard, 2, 3. The others scattered. Climb, Kona shouted. I will hold them. They climbed. Garrett's lungs burned. His legs screamed. The young prisoners were barely conscious, pulling themselves up on pure will. More gunfire from below. A bullet struck the rock next to Garrett's head, sent stone fragments into his face. He kept climbing. They reached the rim, collapsed on solid ground. Kona was still firing, keeping the guards pinned. How many left? Garrett gasped. Too many, and they will bring reinforcements from the main camp. We need to move now. They ran, or tried to. The prisoners could barely walk. Nashota and Garrett had to support them, carrying the weakest. Behind them the guards reached the rim, started pursuit. We cannot outrun them, Nashota said. Not like this. Kona looked at the prisoners, at their chains, at their weakness. Looked at the guards closing in, made his decision. You go, Kona said. I will slow them down. No, Garrett said. We do not leave anyone behind. You do not leave them behind. Kona nodded at the prisoners. But I am not one of them. This is my choice. Kona, there are too many. You will die. I know, Kona smiled. It was a terrible smile, full of pain and fury and 6 years of waiting. But I will die hurting Morrison. That is enough. He pulled something from his pack. 3 bottles filled with oil rags stuffed in the necks. Homemade bombs. There is a narrow pass ahead, Kona said. They will have to go through single file. I will make them pay for every step. Nashota gripped Kona's shoulder. You are brave. Your father would be proud. Tell Ayana I am sorry I could not see her again. Then Kona turned and ran back toward the pursuing guards. Garrett wanted to stop him, wanted to argue, but there was no time. Kona was already gone, running toward his death with the same fierce determination he had lived with for 6 years. Garrett gripped Nashota's arm. We make his death mean something. We get these boys home. We destroy Morrison. That is how we honor him." Nashota nodded, tears on his face. He was the bravest of us all. The prisoners were dying on their feet. Every second mattered. "Move," Garrett said. "Do not let his sacrifice be for nothing." They moved. Heard the first explosion behind them. Screams. Another explosion. Gunfire sustained and vicious. Then silence. Kona was gone. Garrett would carry that silence for the rest of his life. The silence that meant a brave young man had died buying time for others to live. Kona had spent 6 years hunting Morrison, and in the end, he had traded his life not for revenge, but for rescue. That was worth remembering, worth honoring. They reached the horses Garrett had hidden in the rocks. Not enough for everyone. Garrett and Nashota rode double the prisoners, clinging to the saddles as best they could. They rode through the night, did not stop, did not look back. When dawn came, they were 20 miles from Red Canyon, deep in broken country, where Morrison's men would have trouble tracking them. They stopped in a sheltered ravine, built a small fire, broke the chains with rocks and a hammer Garrett had in his saddlebag. It took 2 hours, but finally all the prisoners were free. Nashota sat apart from the others, staring at nothing. His wrists were raw from the shackles, bleeding. His face was hollow. Garrett sat down next to him, said nothing. Sometimes there were no words. Finally, Nashota spoke. "Ayana, tell me about her. Tell me she is all right. She is strong, stronger than you know. She was 12 when I last saw her, just a child. She is a woman now, a fighter." Nashota closed his eyes. Tears ran down his face, cut tracks through the dirt and soot. "I thought she was dead. For 6 years, I thought I was alone, that I was the last. You were not alone, and you never will be again." Nashota looked at Garrett. "Why did you do this? Really, you do not know me, do not owe me anything. I owe Ayana. She saved my life once. I am repaying the debt." "When did she save you?" Garrett touched the scar on his face. "The night Morrison tried to kill me. After I hid your sister, Morrison set fire to my house with me inside. I was trapped and burning. I gave up, accepted death." He paused, remembering. "But then someone pulled me out, dragged me through the flames, saved me. I never saw who. Was unconscious by the time I got outside. But later when I woke up, there was a message scratched in the dirt next to me. 2 words in Apache. I had a friend translate." "What did it say?" "We are even." Nashota stared at him. Understanding dawned. "Ayana, she came back for you." A 12-year-old girl walked back into a burning building to save the man who had hidden her from men trying to kill her. She should have run, should have left me to die. But she did not. Garrett stood, looked toward the east, where Ayana was riding alone toward Fort Sumner. "So yes, I owe her. I owe her everything. And I will not rest until she is safe and Morrison is dead." Nashota stood as well, extended his hand. "Then we are allies for Ayana and for everyone Morrison has hurt." They shook, not as enemies, not even quite as friends, but as men bound by the same promise. The sun climbed higher. The day grew hot. They shared what little food and water they had. The young prisoners, freed from their chains, began to look more like boys again. They spoke in low voices, planned what they would do when they returned to their people. "We need to split up," Garrett said. "I need to get to Ghost Ridge by tomorrow sunset to meet Ayana. You need to get these boys somewhere safe." "There is an Apache camp 2 days west," Nashota said. "They will take us in. We will be safe there." "Good. When this is over, when Morrison is finished, I will find you. Bring Ayana to you." "When this is over," Nashota said, "I want to look Morrison in the eyes before he dies. I want him to know who beat him. You will get your chance." They parted ways at midday. Nashota and the 6 surviving boys headed west. Garrett turned south toward Ghost Ridge, toward the meeting place, toward Ayana. He had 1 day. 1 day to cross 60 miles of desert. It was possible barely if he pushed hard and the horse held up. He rode. The sun beat down. The horse began to tire. Garrett walked when he could, giving the animal rest, but every hour counted. He ate in the saddle, drank sparingly from his canteen, kept moving. Night fell. He rode by starlight, trusting the horse to find its footing. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. His body ached from 2 days of fighting and climbing and running, but he did not stop. Dawn of the 4th day found him on the final approach to Ghost Ridge. The landmark was visible in the distance, a distinctive rock formation that rose above the surrounding desert like a broken tooth. He was close, so close. That was when he saw the riders, 6 men coming from the east, moving fast. Not Morrison's men. These wore different clothes, official clothes. Garrett's blood went cold. He spurred his horse forward, raced toward Ghost Ridge. Please let her be there. Please let her be safe. He reached the ridge as the sun touched the horizon, dismounted, climbed the rocks, and saw her. Ayanna sat at the base of the ridge, her back against the stone, her rifle across her knees. She looked exhausted. Her clothes were torn. Blood stained her sleeve, but she was alive. She looked up as Garrett approached, her face transformed. Relief, joy, something deeper. "You came," she said. "I promised." Nashota, alive, safe, on his way to a camp west of here with 6 others we freed. Ayanna closed her eyes. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you. Thank you." Garrett sat down beside her. "The ledger, did you deliver it?" Ayanna's face darkened. "I tried. The governor is dead, murdered 2 days before I arrived. His deputy is one of Morrison's men. He tried to take the ledger, tried to arrest me." "How did you escape?" "A woman helped me, a Mexican woman named Rosa. Her daughter was sold by Morrison, died in the mines." Ayanna's voice broke. "Rosa held off the guards so I could run. They killed her." Garrett put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, shaking. "Too many people are dying for this," she whispered. "Kona, Rosa, that boy in the mine. How many more before it ends? I do not know. But it will end. Morrison will pay." "How the governor is dead. Morrison owns the deputy. Who is left to stop him?" Garrett looked toward the east where the 6 riders were approaching Ghost Ridge. They were close now, close enough to see details. They were soldiers, federal cavalry, and riding at their head was a man Garrett recognized, Brigadier General Henry Carleton, commander of the Department of New Mexico. "Them," Garrett said. Ayanna followed his gaze, saw the soldiers. "Who are they?" "The only man in New Mexico who outranks Morrison. The only man Morrison cannot buy." The cavalry reached Ghost Ridge, formed a perimeter. General Carleton dismounted, walked toward Garrett and Ayanna. He was 55 years old, gray-haired, with eyes like flint. "Vale," Carleton said. "Got your telegram. Took me 4 days to get here." "You came. That is what matters." Carleton looked at Ayanna. "This is the woman with the evidence." "Yes, sir." Ayanna stood, pulled the ledger from her pack, unwrapped the oilcloth, handed it to Carleton. The general opened it, read. His face grew harder with every page. "This is genuine, every word," Ayanna said. "I stole it from Morrison's office. It lists every person he sold, every transaction, every official he bribed." Carleton closed the book. "Dalton Morrison. I knew his father, good man. The son is a cancer." "Can you arrest him?" Garrett asked. "With this evidence, I can do more than arrest him. I can hang him." Carleton looked at Garrett. "But I need your testimony. Both of you. You will have to face him in court. Tell the world what he did." "We will testify," Ayanna said. "Good. My men and I will ride to Morrison's estate tomorrow. Place him under arrest. But Morrison will not go quietly. He has at least 30 men working for him. There will be a fight." "Then I am coming with you," Garrett said. "And me," Ayanna added. Carleton studied them both, saw the determination in their eyes, nodded. "All right, but you follow my orders. This is a military operation now." They made camp at Ghost Ridge. Carleton's men set watches, built fires, cooked food. It was the first hot meal Garrett had eaten in 4 days. The first time he had felt safe in 6 years. That night, as the stars came out, Ayanna sat with Garrett away from the fires. "When this is over," she said quietly, "what will you do?" "I do not know. I have no home, no land, nothing." "You have a promise to keep." "What promise?" "To bring me to Nashota, to reunite us." Garrett smiled. "Yes, I will do that. And after—" He looked at her. In the firelight she looked both young and ancient, a woman who had seen too much, survived too much, but had not let it break her. "After, I would like to rebuild, start over, do something good with whatever time I have left." "Would you do it alone?" The question hung in the air between them. Garrett understood what she was asking, what she was offering. "No," he said finally. "I do not think I would want to do it alone." Ayanna took his hand. Her fingers were calloused, strong, warm. They sat in silence, watching the stars, knowing that tomorrow would bring violence and blood and possibly death. But tonight, for just a few hours, they had peace. And sometimes peace was enough. Morrison's estate sat in a valley 20 miles south of Santa Rosa, a sprawling compound that spoke of wealth built on suffering. The main house was 2 stories of whitewashed adobe and imported timber, its windows reflecting the morning sun like watchful eyes. Around it, arranged in a defensive perimeter, stood barrack stables, a cookhouse, and storage buildings. High walls enclosed the compound. Guard towers marked each corner. It looked more like a fortress than a ranch. General Carleton studied the estate through his telescope from a ridge half a mile away. Garrett and Ayanna crouched beside him, along with 6 cavalry soldiers. The rest of Carleton's men were positioned around the valley, cutting off escape routes. 30 men, you said," Carleton murmured, still looking through the glass. "I count 20 visible. The rest must be inside." "Morrison keeps his personal guard close," Garrett said. "The most loyal, the most dangerous." "Can we talk him out?" one of the soldiers asked. Carleton lowered the telescope, looked at the young man with something like pity. "Some men like Morrison do not surrender. They fight until they win or until they are dead. There is no middle ground." He turned to Garrett. "You know the layout. Where will Morrison be?" "His office. 2nd floor, southeast corner, windows facing the valley. He likes to see everything, control everything." "Can we get to him without killing everyone in the compound?" "Maybe. If we move fast. If we get lucky." "Luck?" Carleton smiled grimly. "I stopped believing in luck about 20 years ago, but we work with what we have." He gathered his men, outlined the plan. 2 squads would approach from the east and west, create a diversion, draw Morrison's men to the walls. A 3rd squad, led by Carleton himself, would breach the main gate while the defenders were distracted. Garrett and Ayanna would come with this group, moving directly for the main house for Morrison. "Our objective is to take Morrison alive," Carleton said. "He stands trial, the world sees what he has done, and justice is served publicly. But if he resists, if he threatens lives, you are authorized to use lethal force." The soldiers nodded. They were career men, professionals. They had done this before. But Ayanna's hand tightened on her rifle. Garrett saw the conflict in her eyes. She wanted Morrison dead, wanted to pull the trigger herself, but she also wanted the world to know, wanted his crimes exposed, wanted justice, not just revenge. "You ready?" Garrett asked quietly. "I have been ready for 6 years." "That is not what I asked." Ayanna met his eyes. "I am ready to do what needs to be done, whatever that is." They moved into position. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning cool. Heat shimmered off the valley floor. Somewhere a hawk cried, riding thermals above the ridge. Garrett checked his weapons, rifle loaded, pistol loaded, knife secure. He had been a foreman once, not a soldier, but 6 years of isolation had taught him how to fight, how to survive. He was not the same man who had fled Morrison's fire. He was harder now, colder, ready. The signal came, a single gunshot from the eastern ridge. Morrison's compound erupted in controlled chaos. Guards ran to the eastern wall, taking positions, returning fire. The western diversion started seconds later. Now Morrison's men were split, defending 2 sides. Carleton's squad moved fast, covering the open ground in a crouching run. They reached the main gate. It was heavy timber reinforced with iron barred from inside. "Blow it," Carlton ordered. One of the soldiers placed a charge at the base of the gate, lit the fuse. They all retreated 20 yards. The explosion was massive, a thunderclap that echoed off the valley walls. The gate disintegrated in a shower of splinters and smoke. They rushed through. The compound yard was chaos. Guards running, shouting, trying to respond to 3 threats at once. Carlton's men moved like a machine, firing with precision. Guards fell. Garrett and Ayanna broke left, heading for the main house. A guard stepped out of the cookhouse, rifle rising. Garrett shot him. The man dropped. They reached the main house door. It was locked. Garrett kicked it. Once, twice, the frame splintered. They were inside. The interior was opulent in a way that made Garrett sick. Thick carpets, oil paintings, furniture carved from dark wood. All of it purchased with blood money, with lives stolen and sold. Gunfire erupted behind them. Carlton's men were engaging Morrison's guards in the yard. It would not take long. The cavalry were trained soldiers. Morrison's men were hired guns brave enough against unarmed prisoners, less so against professional troops. "Upstairs," Garrett said. "Stay behind me." They climbed the wide staircase, weapons ready. The second-floor hallway was empty, doors closed. At the far end, one door stood open. Light spilled out. Morrison's office. They approached carefully. Garrett went first, rifle to his shoulder, reached the doorway, looked inside. Morrison sat behind a massive desk, perfectly calm, a crystal glass of whiskey in his hand. He was 40 years old, dressed in an expensive suit, his face clean-shaven, his eyes cold and calculating. He looked like a gentleman, a businessman, not a monster. "Vale," Morrison said, as if greeting an old friend. "I wondered when you would show up. And you brought the Apache girl? How touching." Garrett stepped into the room, kept his rifle trained on Morrison's chest. Ayanna followed, positioning herself to cover the windows. "It is over, Morrison. General Carlton has 30 men surrounding this compound. Your guards are surrendering. You are under arrest." Morrison took a sip of whiskey, completely unconcerned. "Am I on what charges?" "Murder. Kidnapping. Human trafficking." "Should I go on?" "Accusations. You have no proof." Ayanna pulled the ledger from inside her jacket, threw it on the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. "We have all the proof we need. Your handwriting, your records, every person you sold, every official you bribed. It is all there." Morrison looked at the ledger. Something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, annoyance, like a man discovering a leak in his roof. "That ledger is private property, obtained illegally. It will never stand up in court." "It will when I testify," Ayanna said. "When I tell the court how you murdered my family, how you sold children to die in your mines." Morrison's expression hardened. He set down his glass, stood slowly. "Your family, yes, the Neshoba family. I remember them, squatting on my land, refusing to leave. They forced my hand." "You murdered them for profit," Garrett said. "I removed an obstacle. That is business." "You are a monster." Morrison smiled. It was a terrible smile, empty of humanity. "I am a businessman. I saw an opportunity and I took it. Those Apache were sitting on land rich with silver. They were not using it. I was. Simple economics." "You killed children." "Collateral damage. Regrettable but necessary." Ayanna raised her rifle, pointed it at Morrison's head. Her hands were shaking not from fear, but from rage. "Give me one reason not to shoot you right now." "Because you want justice, not revenge," Morrison said calmly. "Because if you shoot me, you are no better than I am. Because you need me to stand trial to expose everyone who helped me. Kill me now, and they all go free." His logic was sound. Infuriating, but sound. Ayanna's finger trembled on the trigger. Garrett could see the war inside her. The little girl who had watched her family burn wanted Morrison dead. But the woman who had fought for 6 years to stop him knew that a public trial would destroy Morrison's empire, save future victims. "Lower the rifle," Garrett said gently. "He is right. We need him alive. He does not deserve to live." No, but the people he hurt deserve to see him face justice. Ayanna's hands shook harder. Then slowly she lowered the rifle. Morrison's smile widened. Smart girl. Now, if we are done with the theatrics, I believe I have some lawyers to call. That was when the door burst open. Briggs stumbled into the room, wild-eyed, gun drawn. His deputy uniform was torn and filthy blood running from a cut above his eye. He must have ridden hard from Fort Sumner, must have slipped through Carleton's perimeter during the chaos of the assault. "Morrison!" Briggs gasped, chest heaving. "The general has warrants for both of us. We need to go now. I have horses at the servants' entrance in the back. We can still make it to Mexico." Morrison's composure cracked for the first time. "You led them here, you fool. I came to warn you to save us both." Briggs's gun swung between Garrett and Ayanna, then settled on Morrison. "But if you will not run, then I will make sure you cannot testify against me." Morrison did not move. "Briggs, you fool, you were supposed to stop her before she reached the general. I tried. She got away. Now we run or we hang. I do not run. Then you are an idiot." The standoff held for 3 seconds. Garrett's rifle pointed at Morrison. Briggs's gun pointed at Garrett. Ayanna's rifle pointed at Briggs. Morrison standing behind his desk, unarmed, but somehow still the most dangerous man in the room. Then Briggs made his choice. He swung his gun toward Morrison. "If I hang you, hang with me." He fired. Garrett moved on instinct, diving forward, tackling Morrison behind the desk as Briggs's bullet shattered the window behind where Morrison had been standing. Ayanna fired. Her shot hit Briggs in the shoulder, spun him around. He fired back wildly. His bullet punched through the wall above her head. Garrett rolled, brought his rifle up, fired. The shot took Briggs in the chest. He staggered backward, hit the wall, slid down, leaving a red smear. His gun fell from his hand. He died with his eyes open, staring at nothing. Morrison crawled out from behind the desk, breathing hard. For the first time, his composure cracked. "That idiot almost killed me." "He should have," Ayanna said coldly. "Would have saved us the trouble." Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Carleton burst into the room, soldiers behind him, weapons ready. He took in the scene. Briggs dead. Morrison alive. Garrett and Ayanna standing. "What happened?" "Briggs tried to escape with Morrison," Garrett said. "We stopped him." Carleton looked at Morrison. "Dalton Morrison, you are under arrest by order of the United States Army for crimes against the people of this territory. You will be transported to Santa Fe to stand trial." Morrison straightened his jacket, regained his composure like putting on a mask. "I want my lawyer present for any questioning." "You will have your lawyer. You will have your trial, and then you will hang." 2 soldiers moved forward, grabbed Morrison's arms, shackled his wrists behind his back. Morrison did not resist. He looked at Garrett with those cold, empty eyes. "You think you have won, Vale, but you have not. I have friends, money, influence. I will be free within a month." "Maybe," Garrett said. "But everyone will know what you are, and that is enough." They led Morrison away. Garrett watched him go. He had expected to feel triumph vindication, the weight of 6 years lifting from his shoulders. Instead, there was only a deep, bone-tired exhaustion, the kind that comes after a war ends and a man realizes he survived but cannot quite remember why he fought. Ayanna stood beside him, watching Morrison disappear down the stairs. "It does not feel like victory," she said quietly. "It never does." They walked out of Morrison's office, down the stairs into the compound yard. The fighting was over. Morrison's guards had surrendered, were being rounded up and disarmed. A few bodies lay scattered across the yard, men who had chosen to fight rather than give up. Carleton was organizing his men, preparing to transport prisoners back to Santa Fe. He saw Garrett and Ayanna walked over. "The ledger is secure. We have Morrison in custody. By nightfall, word will spread across the territory. This is over." "What about the people Morrison sold?" Ayanna asked. "The ones still imprisoned in the mines. We will send troops to every mine Morrison owned, free everyone we find. It will take time, but it will happen. And Morrison's partners, the officials he bribed. Carlton's jaw tightened. The ledger lists names. We will investigate everyone. Some will be arrested. Some will resign in disgrace. The corruption will be exposed. It was not everything. It was not perfect. But it was justice, real justice, the kind that happened in daylight for everyone to see. "Thank you, General," Garrett said. Carlton shook his head. "Do not thank me. Thank her." He nodded at Ayanna. "She is the one who risked everything, who stole that ledger knowing Morrison would hunt her to the ends of the earth. She is the hero here, not me." Ayanna looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what needed to be done." That is what heroes do. They stayed at Morrison's estate that night while Carlton's men secured the compound and prepared for the journey to Santa Fe. Garrett and Ayanna found a small cottage at the edge of the property, away from the main house, away from Morrison's tainted wealth. They sat outside as the sun set, turning the New Mexico sky into a canvas of orange and red and purple. For the first time in days, they were not running, not fighting, not looking over their shoulders. "What happens now?" Ayanna asked. "Morrison stands trial, testifies, probably hangs." "I meant for us." Garrett looked at her. In the fading light she looked young and old at the same time. A woman who had lost everything but refused to break. "I made you a promise to reunite you with Nashota. We should do that first." Ayanna nodded. "He will want to meet you, really meet you, not as an enemy, but as the man who saved his life. I am not sure he will ever see me that way. Give him time. My brother is proud but not stupid. He knows what you did, what you risked." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Ayanna said, "After Nashota, after the trial, what then? I do not know. I have no home, no work, no plan beyond tomorrow. You could build something new, start over, maybe. But I am tired, Ayanna, tired of running, tired of fighting. I do not know if I have it in me to start over." She took his hand, held it gently. "You do not have to do it alone." Garrett looked at their joined hands, hers small and calloused, his large and scarred. Two people who had survived the fire. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that you saved my life twice. Once when I was 12, again now. I am saying that I have nowhere to go either. No family except Nashota. No home. No plan." She met his eyes. "I am saying maybe we could figure it out together." Garrett felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 6 years beginning to thaw. "You barely know me. I know you are a man who keeps his promises, who fights for what is right even when it costs him everything. That is enough." "I am broken, Ayanna. I have done terrible things, things I can never take back. So am I. So have I. We are both broken, but maybe broken people can help each other heal." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. They watched the sun disappear below the horizon, watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. And, for the first time in 6 years, Garrett Vale allowed himself to hope. The trial of Dalton Morrison lasted 3 weeks. It was held in Santa Fe in the territorial courthouse, with judges brought in from Washington to ensure impartiality. The courtroom was packed every single day. Reporters from newspapers across the country attended writing stories that would spread Morrison's crimes from coast to coast. Ayanna testified for 2 days. She stood in front of the court and told them everything: her family's murder, Morrison's slave trade, the children who died in his mines. She showed them the ledger, walked them through every entry, every name, every transaction. Morrison's lawyers tried to discredit her, called her a liar, a savage seeking revenge. But the ledger spoke for itself. Morrison's own handwriting, Morrison's own records, undeniable. Garrett testified next, told the court about his role in the attack on Ayanna's village, told them how Morrison had ordered him to clear the land by any means necessary, told them how Morrison had tried to kill him when he saved Ayanna. Morrison's lawyers painted Garrett as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but Carlton's testimony backed up everything Garrett said. And when the general submitted his own investigation documenting Morrison's network of corruption, the defense collapsed. On the final day, Morrison himself took the stand. His lawyers had advised against it, but Morrison's arrogance would not allow him to stay silent. "I am a businessman," Morrison told the court. "I saw opportunities and I took them. If that is a crime, then arrest every entrepreneur in America." "You murdered families," the prosecutor said. "I defended my property rights." "You sold children into slavery. I employed labor in my mines. If some of that labor happened to be Apache, that is not my fault." "You kept records of buying and selling human beings." Morrison smiled his empty smile. "Prove those records are mine." But the handwriting experts had already proven it. The testimony had already proven it. Morrison's own arrogance had proven it. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to hang. Morrison showed no emotion as the sentence was read. He simply nodded as if confirming a business transaction and allowed himself to be led away. Garrett and Ayanna sat in the courtroom gallery watching him go. Around them, people cheered, celebrating justice served. But Garrett felt only that same hollow emptiness. "It is done," Ayanna said. "Yes." "He will hang tomorrow at dawn." "I know." "Will you watch?" Garrett thought about it. Thought about the man he had been, the man who had followed Morrison's orders without question. Thought about the man he had become, the man who had learned that some things were worth fighting for. "No," he said finally. "I do not need to see him die. I just needed to know he would face justice. That is enough." Ayanna nodded. "Then what do we do?" "We go find your brother. We start rebuilding." And they left Santa Fe the next morning at dawn. As they rode out of town, church bells rang in the distance. The hanging was beginning. Morrison's final moments. Garrett did not look back. They rode west for 2 days following directions Carleton had given them to the Apache camp where Nashotah had taken the freed prisoners. The camp was hidden in a box canyon protected by steep walls and a narrow entrance easily defended. When they arrived, children playing at the canyon mouth saw them first. They ran ahead, shouting. By the time Garrett and Ayanna rode into the camp proper, a crowd had gathered. And standing at the front, looking healthier than when Garrett had last seen him, but still gaunt, still marked by 6 years of imprisonment, was Nashotah. Ayanna dismounted before her horse fully stopped. She ran to her brother. They collided in an embrace that knocked them both off balance, held each other so tightly it looked painful, and wept. Garrett stayed on his horse, watching. This moment belonged to them. He was an outsider here. But then Nashotah pulled back from his sister, looked over her shoulder at Garrett. Their eyes met. Nashotah said something to Ayanna in Apache. She nodded, stepped back. Nashotah walked toward Garrett. His expression was unreadable. Garrett dismounted, stood his ground. If Nashotah wanted to hit him, he would take it. He had earned it. But Nashotah did not raise his fist. He stopped 3 feet away, studying Garrett's face, the scar, the eyes that had seen too much. "My sister tells me you kept your promise," Nashotah said in English. "You brought me out. You protected her. You stopped Morrison." "I did what I should have done 6 years ago." "Yes, you should have." Nashotah's jaw tightened. "You should have refused Morrison's orders, should have stood up to him, should have protected my family." "I know. But you did not, and 23 people died because of your cowardice." The words hit like punches. True, undeniable. Garrett did not flinch. "I know," he said again, "and I will carry that guilt until I die. Nothing I do will ever make it right. I know that too." Nashotah stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, "But you tried. When you realized your mistake, when you saw what Morrison truly was, you tried to fix it. You saved my sister. You saved me. You destroyed Morrison." He extended his hand. "My father taught me that a man is not defined by his worst moment. He is defined by what he does after, how he tries to make things right." Garrett looked at the offered hand, at Nashotah's face, at Ayanna standing behind her brother Hope in her eyes. He took the hand. They shook firmly. "I cannot forgive you for what happened to my family," Nashota said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can respect what you did to stop Morrison, and I can thank you for bringing my sister back to me. That is more than I deserve. Perhaps, but it is what I offer." They released hands. The tension that had hung between them eased, though it did not disappear entirely. It would take time. Maybe years, maybe a lifetime, but it was a start. That night, the camp held a celebration. Morrison was dead hanged at dawn. The prisoners he had enslaved were free. Justice, imperfect and delayed, had finally been served. They roasted meat, shared stories, sang songs in Apache that Garrett did not understand, but felt in his bones. Children who had known only fear and loss laughed and played. Elders who had lost family members wept and smiled at the same time, mourning and celebrating in the same breath. Garrett sat at the edge of the firelight watching. He did not belong here among these people, but they had welcomed him anyway for Ayanna's sake, if nothing else. She sat beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I do not deserve this, any of this?" "Maybe not, but you are here anyway." "For how long? What happens when the celebration ends, when everyone goes back to their lives?" Ayanna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I have been thinking about that, about what comes next. And the people Morrison sold, the ones the army freed from the mines, they have nowhere to go. Their families are dead, their villages destroyed. They need a place to heal, to rebuild. What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting we give them one. Find land that is not claimed, not wanted by men like Morrison. Build something there. A place where Apache and anyone else who needs refuge can live safely." Garrett looked at her. "You want to start a settlement. Yes, a community, not a reservation where the government tells us what to do. A real home where people can live free. That will take money, resources, time. Yes, but the army seized Morrison's assets, his land, his silver. General Carleton said he would make sure some of it went to Morrison's victims, to us. And you want to use it to build a new home." "Yes, but I cannot do it alone." She looked at him, and in her eyes Garrett saw the question she was really asking. "You want me to help you. I want you to be part of it, to build it with me, to help make something good from all this suffering." Garrett thought about his old life, his ranch, his isolation, his attempt to outrun guilt through silence and solitude. It had not worked. 6 years of running had not made him feel better, had not eased the weight. But these past few weeks, fighting beside Ayanna, protecting her, keeping his promises, that had felt right. That had felt like penance that mattered. "I will help you," he said, "for as long as you want me." Ayanna smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, unguarded and full of genuine joy. "Then we have a deal." She held out her hand. He took it, and they shook, sealing the promise. 6 months later, the settlement was beginning to take shape. They had chosen land in the foothills 30 miles west of Santa Rosa, near a reliable stream with good soil and natural protection from the elements. The territorial government had granted them title to 200 acres, compensation for Morrison's crimes. 20 families lived there now, mostly Apache, the survivors of Morrison's slave trade, but also a few Mexican families, some white settlers looking for a fresh start, people drawn together by shared loss and shared hope. Garrett and Ayanna built a small house at the center of the settlement. 1-story simple, built with their own hands and help from their neighbors. It was nothing like Morrison's mansion, but it was honest work, clean work. They were not married, not officially. There had been no ceremony, no legal papers, but they lived as partners, worked side by side, shared their lives. And slowly, carefully, Garrett began to believe he might deserve it. Nashota lived in the settlement too, in a house he built with the 6 young men he had freed from the mine. They had become his family boys without fathers looking to him for guidance. He taught them to hunt, to track, to survive. Taught them to be men. He and Garrett had reached an understanding. They would never be friends, not truly. The past stood between them like a wall. But they could work together, could respect each other, could build something bigger than their pain. On a cool evening in late autumn, Garrett stood on the porch of his house watching the sunset behind the western hills. Smoke rose from chimneys across the settlement. Children played in the common area. Horses grazed in the pasture. It looked like peace. Ayanna came out of the house, stood beside him. She was wearing a simple dress, her long hair braided. Her face had filled out over the past months, the gauntness of starvation replaced by healthy color. She looked strong, happy. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I never imagined this, any of this." "Are you glad?" Garrett thought about the question, thought about the man he had been, the terrible things he had done, the people he had failed to save. "I cannot be glad about how we got here," he said finally. "Too many people died. Too much was lost. But I am glad we survived. Glad we built this. Glad you are here." Ayanna leaned against him. "Kona would have liked this place, and Rosa, they would have been proud." Yes, they would have. They stood in silence, remembering the dead, honoring their sacrifice. Then Ayanna said, "I have news." "What kind of news?" "The kind that changes things." Garrett looked at her, saw something in her expression, nervousness and anticipation, joy. "I am pregnant," she said simply. The world seemed to stop. Garrett could not speak, could barely breathe. "Are you sure?" "Yes, the healer confirmed it yesterday." A child, their child, a life born not from violence or loss, but from hope and healing. Garrett put his arms around Ayanna, held her gently, felt her heart beating against his chest. "I am afraid," he admitted. "I do not know how to be a father. What if I fail? What if I make the same mistakes? You will not, because you know what mistakes look like, because you have spent 6 years trying to make things right." She pulled back, looked up at him. "And because you will not be doing it alone, we will raise this child together, teach them together, love them together." Garrett felt tears burning his eyes. He did not try to stop them. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he had said the words. "I do not deserve you, but I love you anyway. I love you too, and we both deserve this. We both deserve happiness after everything we have survived." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, as the first stars emerged in the darkening sky. Behind them, through the open door, Garrett could see into their home. Simple furniture they had built themselves, books on a shelf, a rifle mounted above the fireplace, and on the mantel 2 objects, a silver compass engraved with the letters G.V., and a leather ledger, Morrison's ledger, kept not as a trophy, but as a reminder, a testament to the evil men could do and the courage it took to stop them. That night, as they lay in bed, Ayanna said, "What should we name the child if it is a boy?" Garrett thought for a moment, thought about all the people who had died to make this moment possible. "Kona," he said. "We name him Kona, so his sacrifice is remembered. And if it is a girl, Rosa, for the same reason." Ayanna smiled in the darkness. "Those are good names, names of heroes." Yes, they were. Kona, who traded his life so Nashota could go free. Rosa, who held back Morrison's men so I could escape with the ledger. They both could have run, could have saved themselves, but they chose to stand and fight so others could live. That is what heroes do. Ayanna's hand tightened on his. "And when our child asks who they were named for, we will tell them the truth. Every word. We will make sure Kona and Rosa are never forgotten." "Never," Garrett agreed. "We owe them that much. We owe them everything." She nestled against him, her hand resting on her still flat belly. "Tell me a story about the future, about what our child's life will be like." Garrett thought about it, tried to imagine a future free from Morrison's shadow, from the violence and loss that had defined their lives. "Our child will grow up safe," he said quietly, "surrounded by people who love them. They will learn to ride horses, to track deer, to read and write and think for themselves. They will know both Apache ways and white ways, and they will be proud of both. He paused, choosing his words carefully. They will know what we did, what we survived, the mistakes we made and how we tried to fix them. We will not hide our scars from them, but we will also teach them that scars mean you survived, that broken things can heal, that people can change. What else? Ayanna whispered. They will have a choice. When they are grown, they can stay here or leave, build on what we started, or build something entirely new. Whatever they choose, they will know they are loved, that they matter, that their life has value. Ayanna was crying quietly. That is a beautiful future. It is the future we are building, every day, together. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, dreaming of tomorrow. Outside the settlement slept under a blanket of stars. Guard dogs kept watch. Horses shifted in their stalls. A night bird called from the hills. The land that Morrison had tried to claim with blood and fire now belonged to the people he had tried to destroy. The silver he had murdered, for now, built homes, fed families, gave hope. And in a small house at the center of it all, two broken people healed together, building something good from the ashes of their past. Garrett Vale had spent 6 years trying to outrun his guilt through isolation and silence. It had not worked. Guilt could not be outrun. It could only be faced, acknowledged, and transformed through action. He had kept his promise. He had saved Ayanna. He had freed Nashota. He had stopped Morrison. But more than that, he had learned something his younger self never understood. He had spent 6 years trying to outrun guilt through isolation. It had not worked. Guilt could not be outrun. It could only be faced, transformed through action, and slowly, painfully forgiven. He had kept his promises, saved Ayanna, freed Nashota, stopped Morrison. And now he was building something new, something clean, something worth living for. With Ayanna, with their child, with a community of survivors who had chosen hope. That was redemption enough. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything. As dawn broke over the settlement, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Garrett woke to find Ayanna already up, standing at the window, looking out at their community, beginning to stir. "Good morning," he said. She turned, smiled. "Good morning, come look." He joined her at the window. Outside, people were emerging from their homes, beginning the day's work. Nashota leading the young men toward the fields. Children running toward the school building they had built last month. A Mexican woman hanging laundry. A white settler repairing a fence. Different people, different backgrounds, different stories of loss and survival, but all choosing to build together. "This is what we fought for," Ayanna said quietly. "Not revenge, not even justice. This, people living free, living safe, living together." "Yes," Garrett agreed. "This is worth everything." Ayanna took his hand, placed it on her belly. "Our child will grow up here. Will know this as home. Will never know what it is like to run, to hide, to fear. That is the greatest gift we can give them." "No," Ayanna said. "The greatest gift is teaching them that even broken people can build beautiful things. That even the worst mistakes can lead to something good. That hope is always worth fighting for." She looked up at him. "You taught me that. You taught me too. Taught me that forgiveness is possible, that the future is not bound by the past, that love can grow in the most unlikely places." They kissed, gentle and sweet, as morning light filled their home. Outside, the settlement came to life. Work began. Children laughed. Smoke rose from breakfast fires. The day unfolded like any other day, but it was not just any day. It was the first day of the rest of their lives. The first day of a future they had fought and bled and suffered to build. A future where a child would be born free, where broken people could heal, where promises were kept and hope was real, where a man named Garrett Vale, who had once led soldiers to murder innocent families, now protected those families with his life, where a woman named Ayanna Nashoba, who had lost everything, had found something better, each other, a home, a purpose. And in the distance, though they could not see it, The sun rose over Ghost Ridge, where they had first reunited after Morrison's men nearly killed them both. The ridge stood silent and eternal, a witness to their promise kept. And beyond that, deeper into the territory, the mines Morrison had built stood empty now. No more prisoners, no more slaves. The tunnels echoed with silence instead of suffering. Justice had been served, not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to sleep at night, enough to wake each morning without fear, enough to believe that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. Enough to live. And for two people who had spent so long just trying to survive, that was the greatest victory of all. The story of Garrett Vale and Ayanna Neshoba was not a story about heroes. It was a story about ordinary people who made terrible mistakes, who suffered the consequences, who fought to make things right. It was a story about promises kept and second chances earned, about justice delayed but not denied, about communities built from ashes, about children born into hope instead of fear. It was a story that would be told around campfires for generations. The rancher who lost everything and found redemption, the Apache woman who survived genocide and chose forgiveness, the brother who came home, the settlement that rose from Morrison's ruins. But that morning, as Garrett and Ayanna stood together watching their community wake, they were not thinking about legends or stories. They were thinking about breakfast, about the fence that needed mending, about the child growing inside her, about all the small, ordinary, beautiful things that made up a life worth living. And that was exactly how it should be. The war was over. The monster was dead. The future was theirs to build, and build it they would, one day at a time, one promise at a time, one moment at a time, together, always together. The end.